Who else is coming? Hi, Marilyn. Hi, Cindy. Let's see.
Can you see my blue eye?
I can't.
I got contacts on for the first time in my life. They're really blue.
Yeah,
Took
very
me 40
nice.
minutes to figure out how to put them on.
That's cute. Hi, Leslie, Doris, Merle, Stacy.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hello.
Hello.
Let's wait Susan, Risa are here. Doris. So nice to see you all. Julie.
Knowing that when one member suffers, all.
Okay, I'm going to give another few minutes. So I want to. Let's wait another minute.
Could I ask you something before we start?
Of course.
I'm trying to sign up for the special event on the 20th. My computer is acting crazy and I'm trying to get the tickets and I'm not sure, I'm not able to get them. Is there anything I can do about it?
Hannah, can you answer that? Hold on.
Yeah, sorry, who was just speaking?
Doris.
Hi, Doris.
Hi, what I have may or may not be the tickets. It says orders, it says here, and I'm not able to get the exact thing that says tickets. Am I something doing?
Did you print something out or no?
I did. I printed up to it says
can you show it to me? Can you just show it to me? Yeah, those are your tickets. Those should be
my tickets. Oh.
Hannah, do we need to print tickets or you'll have our names?
You don't. You will not need to print your own tickets. We have a list of everyone who's ordered a ticket, and we will be able to check everybody in that way. So
great.
Yeah, and Doris, I'll double check to make sure your name is on the.
My husband and myself. The other thing is, it didn't show any place where to make a donation on these things, so I didn't know what to do about that.
Okay, so with that, there's a separate. There in the email there were two buttons: one to register for the program and one to donate.
I didn't get that.
So
okay, I'll have to
go look at it again. It's one is under the other. Maybe you didn't scroll down enough.
Okay, I'll double check. Thank you.
Yeah, because we set up a team page on the HICE website so that everybody knows the money is just going right to them. We don't have to deal with any transferring of funds and stuff. So the donations go directly to HICE. Right? That's
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Is this Hungarian, Ukrainians?
This is, yeah. Did you get the email, Leslie?
It's not Purim support.
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking about?
Standing up for modern day Haman. I'll share with you that we have some congregants who are musicians in the Los Angeles Philharmonic.
One is Marilyn's son-in-law.
Oh, who?
Dennis.
Dennis Carbazon.
Oh, well, Dennis is playing. Okay, so they volunteered. They came to us and said, we want to do a concert to fundraise for Ukraine. So this is going to be our Purim. I just felt personally, this is not the year to be getting, drinking and laughing and joking around. It just feels so inappropriate that our Purim is going to be on March 20th. We will be reading some of the Megillah. They're going to be playing amazing music. And we're going to talk a little bit about, our connection to the Ukraine. And there'll be a reception before of Ukrainian hors d'oeuvres and foods. And then after a dessert buffet of Ukrainian pastries and hamantashen.
Oh, wow.
And it'll be very lovely. It starts at 6:30. We couldn't do it any earlier. 6 for the hors d'oeuvres because the LA Marathon is that day.
Wow.
It ends at 5. By 5, everything will be completely open. So we're starting at 6. We wanted to start at 4, but we can't because no one would be able to get there. So that's the reason it's at that time, just so you know.
You also on the Wilshire website had a link. It went through Federation to donate to.
That was another time. We just shared that, but this is our own. Because we have these amazing musicians, we're doing it. And I don't know, in the first 3 hours, we had $3,000 already. So we're hoping to really raise, and it's for all refugees in the Ukraine through HICE, because
that's beautiful.
Now, on another note, so if you're ever going to schlep to university campus, this is the time to please come. It's going to be Beautiful. Another thing is this Friday night at Irmis, we're doing a Shabbat, and Max Karmazin is going to be playing violin.
Oh,
Because he can't make it on the 20th because he told us that he's going to be performing for the Academy Awards and he has rehearsal that day.
Oh, wow.
Academy Awards. So we have a very esteemed, illustrious musicians, and it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful event.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I haven't yet had a chance to register. Is there any limit to the number of people that can
No.
go? Oh, okay. So if we do it a little later, it'll be fine.
Right, because I mean, the sanctuary seats 400, 450. And if we get more, we'll open the doors and put out chairs. But I mean, that would be, we also already rented or arranged with the church across the street for extra parking. If our parking lot fills up, literally on the other side of Sunset, there's parking there as well. And we hope that will be our problem, Stacy, that we're so full. That should be our problem.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, okay, so that's that. And I thought because next week we are not going to be together, we should look at the book of Esther and Purim this week. Of course, the women. Now, how many women, I'm curious, this is like a trivia question. How many women names are in the Megillah? How many women's names in the story of Esther? How many? Well, who are
Two.
the,
Two.
who said two?
To
Yeah, I did.
Vashti,
And
Esther and
Esther.
and his
Esther,
wife,
Vashti.
former wife.
there's somebody else.
Oh,
I can't read that fast.
It's, oh, come on, Panina, you know, who's the third woman? She's the villain.
oh,
I can't remember.
Zeresh. Haman's wife also has a villainous moment. So it's interesting to look at these three women and sort of what they represent as like, the sexual woman, the pure woman, and the evil woman. You kind of have all three of them in the story. So, and then I also have a very interesting, we're going to look at this too, a sort of a feminist perspective on Vashti and Esther, written by an Orthodox feminist, which I think is a rare thing. So we're going to start with a blessing. So share with, let's say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidkanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. So I want to, I made this in very big, the part I want to read. Obviously, we can't read the whole thing, but I wanted to start in the beginning and look at chapter 1. In just terms of background, let me come back to you for a second. It's not clear who wrote this story, and it's not clear, even though it's very significant story because it's about overcoming an enemy. It's given a lot of encouragement to Jews over the centuries. There's two interesting things. First of all, God is not mentioned anywhere in the Megillah, the name of God. And there are a couple theories. One is that this was God behind the scenes. It was a conscious decision that it's God behind the scenes, meaning that people have to manifest God and God's, message through their own actions. But also because this was read during a time of basically like a Mardi Gras or Bacchanalia, drunken festival time, there was perhaps this idea we don't want to profane God's name because who knows how people will behave. So there are two possible explanations. Also, biblical scholars sometimes say they're not even sure this is a true story, that this was written during the time of the Babylonian or the Persian New Year, which was a holiday where the Jews who lived there, where people celebrated for 10 days. They got drunk, they put on plays, they put on satires, they wore costumes. It was like a Mardi Gras. And this was the Jewish version which to me it's an allegory because there's truth to it. There's anti-Semitism, there's danger, whatever. It also makes fun of Persian society in that the king, he's drinking for 180 days. He's a bit of a fool. And also there is a suggestion now, Orthodox people would say I'm absolutely wrong, but it is written, it's a suggestion. So I like to share with you that it's also kind of a satire on the gods of Babylonia or Persia, and that Esther is the Jewish version of the goddess Ishtar. Their names are very similar. And so the Jewish Ishtar saves her people, and that Mordechai is the god Marduk, was the big god there. And that is now the Jewish version is wise and an advisor. And apparently there was a god named Haman, Haman, which is just the evil. He keeps his evil or devilish persona. And so this is the Jewish version. And that the Jews or the rabbis of the time said, okay, you can be part of this holiday. We'll have our own story, our own version, but you're not allowed to have sexual promiscuity because that was part of their celebration. And it's got limits, moderation. It's within the Jewish context, but it's still a joyful, fun holiday. Interestingly, though, the Talmud says that when the Messiah comes, we won't celebrate any holidays anymore. We won't need to, except for Purim. Purim will be the only holiday that we will continue to celebrate, which is interesting. Is it because it's so much joy? But that's what they say. I don't know if there's any explanation for that. The thing about this story is, true or not, it's a metaphor for the stranger in the strange land of the Jew. If we look at it, this is the same story as Egypt and Moses. We're the outsiders, we're a threat, we're a danger, we need to be contained or controlled or killed. And there's a savior who saves the people. But in this case, it's a woman, which I think is
Yay.
And it's a woman, and it's a Jewish girl. Of course, her uncle / adoptive father is behind the scenes, but it's also a story of how one person, in my opinion, can make a difference, can change everything. She was the one who was brave enough to change everything by her. And we'll see that she really took her life in her hands, according to the story and the tradition at that time. So,
Rabbi, I don't want to interrupt you, but remember when you told us to carry a grogger in our purse? I have my grogger. I carry it with me all through the year. I keep it in my purse.
Okay, that's funny. Yes, Nina?
Her Hebrew name was Hadassah.
Hadassah. Her Hebrew name was Hadassah. The other thing is, I may have told this, and I told it to my B'nai Mitzvah, adult B'nai Mitzvah class, but also in keeping with the idea of Ishtar, the goddess's presence in the story, the Hamantash. Did I tell you this about the Hamantashen?
No.
So the Hamantashen, which we call in Hebrew Aznei Haman, which means in Hebrew Haman's ear or Haman's hat, some people say, is actually, okay, if you look at it, it's a fertility cake in the shape of the pubic triangle. It's really a vagina cake. It's a vagina cake. If you look at it, it's shaped like a vagina. And it's a fertility cake of the goddess that they probably, they repurposed it, and, but it was probably a very popular pastry. And so they kept it. But that's what they say it stands for. And if you think about it, it makes sense because that's what it looks like. It doesn't look like anybody's ear or anybody's hat. But we're not telling the kids that. But I think it's really interesting and it makes sense. And so it's a very female goddess. It's got these pagan, little threads through the holiday that we've made our own with our own message, personal message of, fighting back and standing up, speaking out, taking a chance and saving our people. So I hope it doesn't offend you, but that's what, the anthropologists and a lot of them say. Everybody's smiling.
At least it's sweet.
Sweet. Exactly. It's a fertility cake is the way you could talk about it. So now, anybody want to say anything or comment or anything about that? No. Okay.
I'm just glad his pastries are sweet.
Yeah, for sure.
I have to say, that's the first time I've ever heard that explanation. I'm trying to visualize it. That's the whole thing.
I'm trying to visualize.
Look at the Hamantaschen, though, it makes sense. You know what I mean? It's pretty cool. So, all right. So now I'm going to share the screen and we're going to look at the first part, which is about Vashti, and we're going to look at her character. So let's start with her. All right. Okay. And okay, so we're only reading the part in the big font. The rest of it is like not necessary. And this is a whole story about how to treat women, how the men said to treat women in the ancient world, and this king. So, okay, Stacy, why don't you read?
Okay. And it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, the same Ahasuerus who ruled from Hodu to Cush, 127 provinces. 2 in those days when King...
The numbers are the verses. You don't have to read them.
Sorry. In those days when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne, which was in Shushan, the capital. In the 3rd year of his reign, he made a feast for all his ministers and servants, the army of Persia and Media, the nobles and all the ministers of the provinces in his service. For many days, 180 days, he displayed the glorious wealth of his kingdom and the splendorous beauty of his majesty.
So basically, he had a party for half a year, like 6 months almost, right? Yeah. So he was a bit of a drunk, a bit of a, party man. You know, he's having this huge party to display his wealth, but to have a party for 6 months, and then at the end, he made another party. Keep going.
Okay. And when these days came to an end, the king made a 7-day feast in the courtyard of the king's palace garden for all the people in Shushan, the capital, noblemen and commoner alike.
So for 6 months, he had his ministers and nobles and the army partying. And then at the last week, he had a party for everyone in the whole town, commoner, noble, everybody. So it's this, and, this story kind of like has a reverberation of this idea of the 7-day or 10-day New Year's party that was actually going on in Persia and Babylonia. Okay, now go over to 9 over here. We're skipping. And Merle, why don't you read?
Queen Vashti too made a feast for the women in the royal palace of King Ahasuerus. On the seventh day, when the king's heart was merry with wine, he ordered Muman, Bezetta.
You can skip their names. The 7 chamberlains.
Thank you. The 7 chamberlains who attended King Ahasuerus to bring Queen Vashti before the king wearing the royal crown, to show her beauty to the nations and ministers, for she was indeed beautiful. But Queen Vashti refused to appear by the king's order brought by the chamberlain, and the king grew furious and his wrath seized within him.
Okay, so why do you think she didn't want to go?
Because he wanted her to dance naked.
That is that's what, I've heard that too, but I didn't find that anywhere. How do we know? Is it in the commentary?
I've looked, I can't find that anywhere, but I was told that at one time.
But when I looked, I couldn't find it. Susan Ehrlich, do you know anything about this?
That's the same story I heard. So, and I couldn't find otherwise.
I just think she was vain or didn't want to be used in front of that court of men.
She was having her own party. Like,
well, that's true.
You had to drop everything and go to him. Like, really?
Yeah.
So, first of all, it shows you the culture. The women and the men were separate. The women were in harems or having their own rooms and chambers. They didn't party together. I don't know what kind of party the men had if there were no women. They're just for 6 months. What were they doing? Just drinking?
I don't want to know.
Maybe they had prostitutes coming in though.
Maybe they had prostitutes, dancing girls or whatever. But she said, no, I'm not coming. And perhaps she thought it was some kind of humiliation, or, it was just a big crowd of screaming men, let's see her. But he wanted to show her off as a possession, and she refused. So what does that say about Vashti's character, or what kind of woman she was? What do we get about her?
Pretty strong woman.
Strong woman, yeah. Opinion,
She stood up for what she wanted, and she didn't want to do that. And she wasn't embarrassed to say that to him, or upset, of concern to say that, to refuse him. I think, maybe she wasn't concerned what he would do to her if she refused.
So,
She didn't want
yes,
to be a possession.
but she was. This is like in 500 or 400 BC.
Right. But not necessarily showing herself off to all those men.
Exactly. Okay.
I mean, sounds crazy, but a private possession. I mean,
Yeah, I agree. Penina, you're muted. Yeah.
Okay. It could be that she was herself a princess, a daughter of another king, because that's what they used to do in those days.
That's true.
King Solomon had 1,000 wives, and they were all daughters of the kings around him. That's why he maintained peace. So it might have been, and it says that she was the one, the chief of the whole harem there, before Esther came into the picture.
Right.
So she might have been a princess herself from before. So she had pride. She didn't want to appear.
She had dignity. She had pride. Susan?
Yes, I think she always gets a bad rap. I think, and I don't think she has to appear naked. In fact, all the more so for her refusal to go show up at the king's party. And plus, let's remember, in terms of the men and the women, the Orthodox still don't party together. I mean, even at weddings. So the
Muslims either. I don't think. I think
it's not
Muslims don't either.
Yeah, it's not so unusual for that, and they may be just telling their dirty jokes or whatever that men do, or talking sport.
Whatever men do, exactly. I have no idea what they do.
But I think she shows some character there.
yes.
Yes, I do too. But here's what happens. Interestingly, okay, he was furious. Okay, so Susan, why don't you read?
Okay, and where were we starting?
So the king conferred.
So the king conferred with the sages, those knowledgeable of the times, for this was the king's custom, to bring such matters before those who were versed in every law and statute.
Okay, so, we don't need their names. Continue. And
he asked them by law what should be done with Queen Vashti for failing to obey the order of King Ahasuerus brought by the chamberlains. Memuchan declared before the king and the ministers, it's not against the king alone that Queen Vashti has sinned, but against all the ministers and all the nations and all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. Yeah, right. It's not just you, it's everybody else. But
every man.
everyone that she's going against. For word of the queen's deed will reach all the women, and here's the problem, and it will belittle their husbands in their eyes. For they'll say, King Ahasuerus commanded that Queen Vashti be brought before him, yet she didn't come. This very day, the noble women of Persia and Media who have heard of the queen's deed will repeat it to all the king's nobles, and there will be much disgrace and anger.
Yes, so if she doesn't have to listen to her husband, our wives will say they don't have to listen to us.
Right. Rebellion. The women are rebelling.
If it please the king, let a royal edict be issued by him, and let it be written into the laws of Persia and Media, and let it not be revoked, that Queen Vashti may never again appear before King Ahasuerus, and let the king confer her royal title upon another woman who is better than she. And the king's decree, which he shall proclaim, will be heard probably throughout his kingdom, for it is indeed significant. And all the women will respect their husbands, noblemen and commoner alike.
I think it's it's nuts, that line that says, and let the king confer her royal title upon another woman who is better than she, who, in other words, who will dance naked in front of everybody and humiliate herself. That's what better than, because she would listen to the king. Or her
She'll obey, someone who will obey him rather than turn.
Obey.
Okay, well, listen.
You're only good if you obey.
Right.
The idea pleased the king and the ministers, and the king did as Mamuchan advised. He sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in its script, and to each nation in its language, saying that every man shall be master in his own home, and that he speaks the language of his nation. So basically, it's like, this is the law now. Every man is the master, and every woman must obey. And, we... in our Christianity, there was also this. I mean, this is in a lot of religions, and in Judaism, not so much. They try to, but it doesn't really work because some rabbis say yes, some rabbis say no. Penina, did you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The fact that they mention, and specifically the noble wives and noble, that's also the reason why she was called Esther and not Hadassah, because the story is that King David came from that line, and they were supposed to be kind of like a part of the royalty of Israel at the time. So if the king knows that she is also a princess of the nation of Judah and Israel at the time, then he has also the authority over the country. It goes back to what we said before, that Solomon married the daughters of the other kings to maintain peace and kind of like authority, or I would say firsthand, into another country's affairs. In other words, it would be like he is also ruling the lineage of David, of King David.
So that's why they said, don't tell your name?
That's right.
That's right. But
not to say that she's actually a descendant of the line of the kings of Israel.
That's interesting, but don't forget that it says he reigned from Hodu to Kush, which is India to Ethiopia. So Judea was under, they say that this is really Xerxes, that
yes.
Judea was already being ruled. But I think that's very interesting because he has no idea who she is. But we're going to talk about Esther in a minute, but I mean, also, I don't know, in my mind, he killed Vashti, but we don't really know what happened.
No, she was sent away. They didn't say that they killed her.
No, they sent her away, or she was still in the harem, but she was demoted because I don't know if he ever gave away his women, or maybe he sold her into slavery. We don't know what happened to Vashti, but Vashti spoke up and she lost her position. She lost everything. And not only that, they passed a law that no woman anywhere in the whole empire, because it was written in every language so that every man in every country would understand this law. So it was pretty draconian about how women must obey men. So with that, yes, Marisa, you're muted.
A while ago, I stopped and looked up about the nakedness, and it's Midrash Megillah 12b.
Okay.
In fact, asked to appear naked. So that's the source of why people carry that story.
Oh, so that's good to know.
Oh, good. Thank you.
So it was more than, so it really some way condones Vashti, meaning praises her for her modesty. She's not a woman and she's not going to reveal herself like that. So I want to now share just this little feminist understanding of Vashti, and then we'll go to Esther. So here's Vashti and Esther. We're just going to read the Vashti part over here. It's just this little part.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
In that culture, it was better for women to have modesty, right?
Yes.
That was, revered. So why is it okay for the king to want to get her to do some new dance and probably have her, sleep with half the men that were there? Why is that considered, okay, this is his wife, the queen, a noble woman, and he wants to just splay her out like some,
He was drunk the whole time.
Okay, does anybody have an opinion?
I'm just thinking part of it, Penina, I think, said he was drunk all the time. But I think also that was a sign then, and maybe even sometimes in today's world, that's a sign of showing what you have.
Right.
This is a sign of showing that she's his possession.
I understand that.
It's a bragging thing.
But he's saying there's no more modesty. It's like, everything else is, the women are over there and the men are over there and the women should be covered and this and that. And you have to be modest and don't go out on your own and all, because we talked about that in prior classes. But now he's like splaying her, wants to splay her out. It's the complete opposite. It's not just put her in fancy jewels and stuff and put her up on a pedestal. He's really humiliating her, which goes against their culture, right?
But that's very typical for men in general that feel the need to show off. Again, she was a possession to him. It didn't matter whether she was a wife or whatever. He was just showing off what he had.
Okay, Miriam.
Rabbi? Yeah.
Trophy wife.
Wait, Miriam.
Okay.
You're muted. Unmute. Okay.
There you go.
You're still muted.
Can't hear you.
Oh, Miriam, I can't hear you. We can't hear you. Oh, doesn't work? Are you on the phone? Oh, I don't know. I was going to say there's also this idea of mob mentality, something you would never do normally. And you're in a crowd and you're drinking and you're boasting and you're whatever. It just ramped up. And they talk about the mob mentality and everything. People do things in mobs that they would never do on their own. And there's some kind of, he's been this party and all these people and he's showing off everything. And we didn't, they go into detail. Oh, these are my riches and these are my riches. And not only that, I have the most beautiful woman in the world. She has the most beautiful body in the world. She has another, and I'm going to show you. So on the other hand, if you see this as more of a fictitious play, it's just showing what an idiot he is. What a drunken fool he is. These are Persians. Sometimes how we go, oh, typical so-and-so. These are Persians. They do this even to their wives. Look at these Persian, peasants, idiots. So there's also, if it's sort of a satirical story, it's also putting Achashverosh in a very bad light as a horrible guy. You're absolutely right. It's the worst thing you could do, and yet he does it. So there's that possibility as well. Did someone else, Stacy?
The impression that I had when we were talking about this is it's kind of like modern day eye candy when guys have, the hot chick and they're walking with her and taking her here and there. It's about their ego.
Exactly.
It's all about their ego, that I got this.
Look who I have.
That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah, I don't think it's that different. Penina.
Is that the trophy?
Things haven't changed.
Is that what they call
Same old, boys will be boys.
So Penina, I'm happy to hear everybody. You're muted, Penina. You're muted.
Okay. All right. So when I was studying the Megillah, we were discussing that the events that were like changing or happening, you have to count how many feasts, drunken feast he had. And all the events that you do going according to the times that he has a feast. He's drunk all the time.
Right.
So that's what motivates all his actions.
Exactly.
First he says kill them, then he says don't kill them. Then he has people who tell him what to do. He's got people he calls Amen to, and Amen tells him to do this and this, do the decree. Then he goes and he hangs Amen and he
he has the
decree. And every time that something count how many feasts is got in the Megillah. Then you'll understand what was the motivation for everything. That's it.
Drinking. Okay. Miriam, do you want to try again to unmute? Try again. Try to unmute one more time. You're muted. Do your little micro. Okay, talk. Miriam? No, we can't hear you. All right, so let's just read about Vashti. Okay, a feminine perspective, just a little bit. Cindy, why don't you read?
Although Vashti and Esther never meet, the relationship between them is integral to understanding the events of the book of Esther. Vashti disappears by the end of the first chapter, but she casts a long shadow over the rest of the book. As we encounter Vashti in chapter 1, we learn the following about her. She is beautiful and headstrong. She throws a good party. She refuses to have her appearances before the king regulated solely by his desires. For this last offense, Vashti pays dearly, losing her crown and incurring perpetual banishment from the king's presence. At the close of chapter 1, it is clear that a woman in Ahasuerus' court would do well to be dutiful and to come before the king as he commands. The essentiality of female obedience is further confirmed by the final verse of the chapter, in which a missive is sent to all of Ahasuerus' subjects, reminding them in no uncertain terms that every man must rule in his household.
Okay, so that's Vashti. So now we're going to look at Esther. So I want to stop this share and go to the other share.
I have one question. Was that in, I printed up the
I didn't send that out. I just found it today.
Oh, I didn't get that either.
I didn't send it. If anybody wants it, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
I printed out the whole other thing.
Yeah, the Megillah, but I did this. I just found this morning, and I thought, oh, no, I want to do this. Okay,
Yeah, that would be good.
Available.
yeah. Okay, so
Thank you.
now what happened was there's a shocking little sentence in here also that I want to make sure you understand. Okay, so who would like to read chapter 2? Doris, you want to read?
Sure. It's not on the stuff you gave us. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. It's chapter 2.
After these events, okay.
Yeah.
After these events, when King Ahasuerus' wrath had abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed upon her. So the king's
now he missed her. Oh, now I don't have a wife.
So the king's attendants advised, let beautiful virgin girls be sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of the kingdom, and let them gather every beautiful virgin girl to Shushan, the capital, to the harem, under the charge of Haggai, chamberlain of the king, custodian of the women, and let their cosmetics be provided. Then let the girl who finds favor of the king's eyes become queen in Vashti's stead. The plan pleased the king, and he acted accordingly.
So basically, all the girls in town, all the virgins, all the young girls are now going to be taken away and ordered to the palace, and they're going to be given cosmetics so that they can make themselves beautiful.
Right.
And then he's going to pick one in like a beauty contest, basically. Now we hear about Esther. So why don't you read one more section there?
There was a Jewish man in Shushan, the capital, whose name was Mordechai, son of Yair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjaminite who had been exiled from Jerusalem with the exiles that had been exiled along with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had sent into exile.
Right. So you have to understand that when the first temple was destroyed, all of the Jews of any note were taken into Babylonia, which is Iraq today. Okay. And then the king Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, was conquered by King Cyrus the Great of Persia. So, they were now Persian citizens, and obviously Mordechai and Esther had moved to Shushan. But, they originally came from Jerusalem. And as Nina said, they were Benjaminite, which was King David was, I think, from Benjamin originally, and Judah together. And they were now in Shushan. Okay, continue, Doris.
He had raised his cousin Hadassah, also called Esther, for she had neither father nor mother. The girl was shapely and beautiful, and when her father and mother died, Mordechai adopted her as his daughter.
So people always say, is his cousin? Is it his daughter? Okay, now we know it was his cousin and he is her adopted father. He adopted her because she was an orphan. Okay, so now, all right, Penina, do you want to read? Verse 8. You're muted.
Okay, which part?
8. Now,
8? Okay, now when the king's order and edict became known, and many girls were gathered to Shushan, the capital, under the charge of Haggai, Esther was also taken to the palace under the charge of Igal, custodian of the women. The girl found favor in his eyes and won his kindness, so that he hurried to provide her with her cosmetics and meals and the 7 maids that were to be given her from the palace.
Okay, so that's interesting. Esther stood out even among, now Haggai, I don't know why they don't say it here, but he was a eunuch. The only men that in Persia that were in the harem were eunuchs. They were castrated, so they couldn't have sex with the women. They wouldn't trust a regular man. You worked in the harem, you were castrated. And she found favor, she was, well, they don't say why. She found favor and he liked her and he was kind to her and he gave her food, he gave her cosmetics. I love that cosmetics is emphasized so much. This is the second time and they're going to be third time. Cosmetics. And I don't know if that's like a commentary on Persian society, but obviously women you didn't have natural beauty. You had to really paint yourself. Okay, so just continue. I want to read this part. Go ahead. Nina.
Okay, also transferred her and her maids to the best quarters in the harem. All the while, Esther did not divulge her race or ancestry, for Mordechai had instructed her not to tell.
Right. So just a second. Why do you think, okay, so there's like, Penina suggested that, so he wouldn't know that she was from royalty of the line, the Judaic line of royalty. Is there any other thoughts of why he said, don't tell anyone you're Jewish? Do you have any other thoughts on that? Why? Don't tell him you're Jewish.
Because there was persecution going on?
Or I would think there was. Oh, you didn't know. It's curious. I don't think it's just that. I think there is something about, we don't know how they feel about Jews. We already were exiled in Babylonia, now in Persia, keep a low profile. Yet Mordechai, I think, was probably overtly Jewish, but he told his niece or cousin not to reveal that she was Jewish.
No, it didn't say that she shouldn't reveal that she's Jewish. She shouldn't reveal for her lineage.
Okay, so you think it's definitely
we just read that.
Okay, that's interesting.
That was her lineage. He didn't want them to know that she's from the line of King David.
But also, he doesn't know she's a Jew because
that's okay. So he didn't know that she's anything. He didn't know.
It says race or ancestry, so it could cover
both
her lineage, but also
it's the lineage.
And maybe it's related. Maybe if she reveals that she's Jewish, someone will ask questions and.
Right.
Boy, do I know the feeling.
Yeah. Okay, so it's like don't just keep a low profile. Maybe he won't. Right. Also, stay under the radar. Yet she was immediately, according to the story, noticed by the attendants and given special treatment. So there was something about her. Well, of course, in the story there would be, because she's our heroine, so she has to be special. Okay, so I want to read you this part. Every day, Mordechai would stroll in front of the harem courtyard to find out how Esther was faring and what was to be done with her. Now, when each girl's turn came, get this, to go to King Ahasuerus after undergoing this prescribed 12-month care for women.
No, wow.
Only then would their period of beauty care be completed. 6 months with oil of myrrh, 6 months with perfumes and women's cosmetics. Oh my God, this is the complete
complete makeover.
With which the girl would appear before the king. She would be provided with whatever she requested to accompany her from the harem to the palace. So for a year, these girls are taken away from their families. They're like wearing oil of myrrh. They're being beautified, like it reminds me of like fattened cows, how you like fatten cows, you feed them for the slaughter to devour, you get them all ready. And then this part is shocking. In the evening, she would go to the king. And in the morning, she'd return to the second harem.
What that means.
Under the charge of Shagaz, the king's chamberlain, custodian of the concubines. She would not go to the king again unless the king desired her, whereupon she would be summoned by name. So every night he slept with another girl. She was bespoiled or ruined for marriage and became one of the king's concubines. So it's basically, in this story, every virgin girl was in the king's harem in the whole town.
Oh my God.
Pretty awful. And again, I have to say, I kind of feel like they're saying, look at these Persians, what kind of people are they? It's
why would the fathers allow that?
It was a law. The guards came and took them away.
You didn't have an option.
You had no choice.
Move or something. I mean, protect your child. They're all hypocrites.
They were all afraid.
But it wasn't just them. In that particular culture, they're not allowed to marry more than one woman. They're allowed to have it actually as their wives.
Yeah, but the question is, these girls are no longer eligible for marriage.
Right, they can't have they can have children, but they can't be married. It's done.
They can't live, go home. They can never go home again. They're now in the king's second harem.
So did all the families hide the girls when they're born?
No.
They took them off somewhere else?
No. It was a good deal as far as business too. It was
did they get money for them?
No.
They got stuff for them for sure.
Or something.
They call it.
I don't know what they got. I mean, what's interesting is, I'll tell you a story in reverse, a true story. I met this woman, older woman, and she lived in Singapore and Jewish. And I said, how did your family get to Singapore? And she said, during World War I, they were conscripting. We lived in Iraq, Jews in Iraq. They were conscripting all the boys, and they were going after the Jewish boys first. And so my father said, well, there's two. One, I heard that they dressed their sons as girls, so they didn't know they had sons. And then the father said, dress as a girl and go to the port and get on a ship. And wherever you go, just get on the first ship out of here. We'll follow. And he got on a ship to Singapore. So the whole family moved to Singapore. Ironically, during World War II, they were arrested by the Japanese, not as Jews, but kind of British subjects or whatever, and then put in a concentration camp for a while.
Oh, God.
They survived. But I'm saying that, I mean, Leslie, I love your question. Did they hide their daughters? Maybe. Some might.
So how would society continue? Because in order to have a daughter, you need a husband and a wife. If the whole generation of women are going into the harem, there are no more husbands and wives. So when the concubines got pregnant, the child was taken away. How does society continue?
Okay, Penina, you're muted. Penina, you're muted.
The Yemenite Jews that came to Israel, they were brought to Israel from Yemen.
Yeah.
They came with more than one wife. And the wife didn't want to leave.
You're not understanding the question. There were no wives for the people if all the girls were in the harem. Yes, the king may have had 1,000 wives, but what about the 1,000 boys who had no wives in Shushan. If there were no eligible girls in Shushan.
But this is
But
something
there wouldn't
we
even, but at some point, there won't even be any more
assume. I
boys.
don't think we assume this. It doesn't say that in the story.
It says it took all the virgins.
All the virgins
then-
that presented themselves. He told her not to go in the beginning.
Okay, well,
Or later he said go.
obviously okay, so this is another question of, is this a true story? Or is this an allegory? Is this a metaphor? And because it makes no sense in a way. It's just this, it just reveals his rapacious sexual appetite. You know what I mean?
And they had to be pretty.
Yes, they had
Or
to
made
Well, they had to be
by
pretty
all
for
this
him to sleep with
cosmetic.
him, but they were all taken.
All the
were
cosmetics.
taken. It says all girls.
Let's create our own midrash and say that if you had a son and you wanted the son to get married, you had to buy the girl back from the king,
Or
from the harem.
here's a midrash that Leslie will like. I think I would marry my daughter off immediately. As soon as the law came out, before they got to my house, I would marry her so she wasn't a virgin and she wasn't eligible.
There you go.
That would have been a way to avert.
They did that.
So what
They
if she was
did
like
that.
6?
They married the girls at 9 and 12. Yes.
Okay, so therefore, I mean, I'm just saying that's a possibility, Leslie, in order to avert that, is that they married them or they betrothed them or whatever they did. She's married and they didn't. But Esther, because she had to go, because she's our heroine, because she's Ishtar, because she's the Jewish goddess who's going to save her people, Esther went, and lo and behold, surprise, surprise. Hold on. Hold on.
15, is it?
And it came when the 15. So who hasn't read? Merle, have you read?
Yeah, I read. I'll read again if you want me to.
Okay, who hasn't read?
I haven't.
Jonah, why don't
Leslie
you?
didn't
And
read.
when the time came for Esther, daughter of,
Michael.
okay, thank you, uncle of Mordechai, who had taken her as a daughter to go to the king, she did not ask for a thing other than the
Hagar.
which Hagar, the angel, the king's chamberlain, custodian of the women, had advised. And Esther found favor in the eyes of all who saw her.
Okay, so everybody else was asking for all kinds of cosmetics and things. Esther was a natural beauty, and she did not need anything else. Okay, go ahead.
Esther was taken to King Sherebiel, I can't say that,
That's
to
okay.
his palace in the 10th month, in the month of Tibet, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she won his favor and kindness more than all the virgins. He placed the royal crown on her head, and made her queen in Vashti's stead. Then the king made a grand feast for all of his ministers and servants, the feast of Esther.
Okay, so here's another. Penina is pointing out yet another drunken party.
And he lowered taxes to the promise and gave her presents before the king.
And when the virgins were gathered a second time, Mordechai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther would still not divulge her ancestry or race, as Mordechai had instructed her. Indeed, Esther followed Mordechai's instructions just as she had done while under his care. So, okay, now this is what we have a little bit of time, but I really want to show you. Hold on. Where's the stop share? Where does it go? How do I stop share? Stop share. I want to look at the feminist view of Esther because this is interesting. Okay, share. Okay, has anyone not read who would like to read? Did anybody not read? Oh, Risa, are you there? I don't know if she's still here. Are you here? No.
I'm here.
Risa, will you read by contrast?
By contrast, Esther is presented at first as the perfect foil to Vashti. Whereas Vashti was willful and independent, Esther is passive and submissive. The reflexive use of the Hebrew word lakacha is constantly applied to her. She is taken in by Mordechai as a foster daughter, taken to the king's harem, and taken before the king. She does not reveal her identity at the palace, for Mordechai had commanded her not to tell. She requests nothing at the harem, only accepting whatever Haggai, the king's eunuch, chooses to give her. Even after she's crowned queen, we are told that Esther continues to obey the commands of Mordechai, as she has done under his care. It is no surprise that Ahasuerus loves Esther. She is the model of docility and an exact antidote to Vashti. Esther understands very well her role as Ahasuerus' queen. When Mordechai commands her to appear before the king and intercede on behalf of the Jews, Esther responds that everyone knows that those who appear before the king unbidden are condemned to die. She has learned from her predecessor's fate that the queen's job is to come when she is called. Mordechai insists to Esther that it is her responsibility to plead for her nation.
Okay, this is a moment of crisis for Esther. She is caught between conflicting obediences to her foster father and husband. In addition, to come before the king unsummoned is an abnegation of her role as Vashti's replacement. She was chosen to be queen since she represented the antithesis of Vashti's persona. Esther's position, her identity, and quite possibly her life are all closely tied to her obedience to the king. In this moment of fate, Esther looks into her mirror and discovers that she does not look quite so different from Vashti after all. She takes matters into her own hands and stands up to both sources of authority. Esther assumes control of Mordechai's plan, changing and amending as she sees fit. Like Vashti, she will appear before the king only when she decides that the time is right. In this case, after 3 days of fasting. Instead of following Mordechai's suggestion and simply making her petition, she will throw a series of parties, as Vashti did. In order to succeed, Esther realizes she must take on aspects of the repudiated former queen. So she sort of learned from Vashti not to make her mistakes, and what can work and what can't is what this person is saying. Of course, we do not know actually why Vashti refused to appear before the king. It could have been out of modesty, as the Midrash in Esther Rabbah suggests, or as the Babylonian Talmud describes, she may simply have been unhappy with her appearance that day. Oh, I don't go with that. That suddenly she got a tail, or she got, no. Perhaps she was a proto-feminist fighting for a sense of independent integrity. In any event, Vashti's disobedience brings her career to an abrupt end, and her fate is quite deliberately meant to serve as an object lesson to women everywhere. As Esther marshals her strength to save her nation, she must revisit the experiences of her shunned predecessor and learn from them. Esther is more calculated, more subtle, more divinely inspired, and ultimately far more successful than Vashti. Yet in order to triumph, Esther must confront the image of Vashti and incorporate, or perhaps discover, the attributes of Vashti in herself. And this woman, I just want to share this with you. As Orthodox feminists, this is who wrote it. We are constantly confronted with taboo images of dangerous women from whom we are told to distance ourselves. A is too radical. B has gone too far. C has made too many enemies. We struggle to draw our borders to be open and yet traditional, free, and yet constrained within halacha. Purim is a holiday in which we explore and challenge our boundaries. We dress up as other people. Some of us drink to the point where differences become blurred. In the spirit of this holiday and following the legacy of our ancestor Esther, I encourage us to re-examine whom we emulate and from whom we shy away. We may discover, as Esther did, that we are not so different from those who we fear, and that the most important lessons can be learned from the likeliest of teachers. So I think that's really interesting, the idea that Esther starts out very submissive, and then in order to save her people has to, like, you know, look in the mirror and say, you know, slap up, you know, get it together, girl, and speak up, Risa.
I learned in Israel that the Orthodox women take this as a very strong message, and they all the family goes to services on Erev Purim and hears the Megillah. But the next morning, in the privacy of their homes, the women read the Megillah out loud to their family. And Anat Hoffman allowed that to get one step further.
Anat Hoffman is the woman at the wall, the head of the
Yeah, the director of Women of the Wall, the founder of Women of the Wall. She does, those of you who have been to Israel know Ben Yehuda, which is the central area of, wait a minute, let me just turn this up. The central area of the shopping area and everything, the main, what do you call it, pedestrian street. And everybody gets dressed up and they have women reading out loud there in public rather than just privately in their homes. But it's a big deal. And every single word has to be listened to. And there's total silence in the Megillah reading when that happens in the synagogue. Total silence until the name Haman, and then it's noise, but it's controlled. It's controlled noise for a short period of time. So the reading of the Megillah has become a major, major feminist statement. And the other big thing that's emphasized is everybody reads the story and knows Esther and Vashti and everything, but you have to read the end.
Yeah.
Because the end is pretty nasty. And a lot of people never pay attention to read to the end. So I suggest that you do that.
In the end, we're going to stop now because I have a doctor's appointment at 2:00 and I have to go. The Jews then turn on their enemies and there's a slaughter against the enemies of the Jews, which we usually don't have. Okay, Penina, the last word.
Okay. Actually, they got a permission to defend themselves. This is a very strong point. If you live in a country that you have to have permission to defend yourself, the message is get out of there. So the idea also of Esther is as a king, princess, she has the ability to assemble people. And the assembling was a very, very touchy point in those days. That's why the temple was taken down. And also, according to the Assyrian history, I looked it up in a lexicon, they call it, a biblical lexicon. Ashur used to take the rich people first down before they took the rest of the nation. They exiled the rich people. Why? First of all, they would have the money to rebuild another temple. So the temple is a center of assembling. And that's what they didn't want. Because you know this, there is strength in numbers, you know that.
Right.
So, and also, if they would be rich, they would be able to pay for another army, to put together another army. So this whole idea of the story is actually, there is a message there. It's that get out of the country who you need permission to defend yourself. Because first they were told to kill all the Jews. Then he gave them permission, he gave the Jews permission to kill. But after the order to kill the Jews was out, the king himself could not reverse it. Right. So that's why he had to send another order to give them the Jews the permission to kill. But anyhow, what it turned out to be that it was actually a permission to defend themselves, because the other ones were still had the order to kill. So you have this whole thing there that it really is actually it has a message here. And as a woman from the lineage of King David, she could have been like Deborah, like Deborah. She could have been a strong enough personality to assemble people against the king. So that's why the whole idea of anonymous, how do you say?
Being anonymous.
Yeah, that she shouldn't be. There is a lot more to this to know.
Of course there is.
You have to know the history of all this whole transfer to Assyria, how it was done to understand what was going on.
Thank you, Penina. I unfortunately have to stop now, but this is so interesting. Happy Purim, everyone.
Happy Purim.
See you in 2 weeks, and we can continue this discussion for a
Feel
little
better. Feel better.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. See you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.